The universe of Rick and Morty is crowded with life. Not just intelligent species with language and technology, but creatures that exist quietly on the edges of perception. Some appear for only a moment. Some linger in the background. Some fill entire worlds without ever being fully understood. Together, they form a living texture that stretches across realities, vast enough that no single creature ever feels central. These beings are not introduced with ceremony. They are simply there. Many creatures in this universe are shaped less by intention and more by environment. Bodies adapted to gravity that pulls too hard or not enough. Limbs formed to navigate terrain that never settles. Senses tuned to wavelengths that humans barely notice. These creatures move through their worlds without urgency, doing what their biology requires and nothing more. Some are large, but size does not make them important. Massive silhouettes drift across skies or oceans, too slow to register as threats. Their movements are deliberate and economical. Energy is conserved. Nothing is wasted. They exist on scales where panic serves no purpose. Others are small and numerous, filling ecosystems through repetition rather than dominance. They crawl, float, or cluster together, responding to simple cues: light, heat, motion. Their lives unfold in tight loops, predictable and calm. Observation reveals patterns, not drama. There are creatures whose bodies appear unfinished, asymmetrical, or constantly shifting. Limbs regenerate. Forms change slowly over time. These beings do not resist transformation. Change is built into their existence. They adapt without tension, reshaping themselves as conditions shift. Some creatures live entirely underground, rarely encountering open space. Their bodies are compact, senses inward focused. They respond to pressure, vibration, and proximity rather than sight. Their worlds are quiet and enclosed, defined by touch rather than distance. Others exist in open environments, with no shelter at all. Their forms are streamlined. Movement is continuous. Rest happens while drifting rather than stopping. These creatures never settle in one place long enough to become attached to it. Many beings in this universe do not experience fear as humans understand it. Their nervous systems are tuned differently. Danger is processed as information, not emotion. Reaction replaces reflection. Survival unfolds automatically, without anticipation or dread. There are creatures that exist primarily in stillness, rooted organisms that barely move across their lifetimes. They grow slowly, responding only to changes in light or temperature. Their presence feels patient. Time passes around them without consequence. Some creatures glow softly, not as a display, but as a byproduct of internal processes. Bioluminescence pulses gently, marking rhythms of digestion or communication. These lights are not signals meant to be interpreted. They simply occur. Other beings absorb light entirely. Their surfaces appear matte, swallowing brightness. They blend into their environments so completely that they are only noticed when they move. Even then, movement is minimal. There are creatures that exist in water so dense it slows every gesture. Their bodies are buoyant and smooth. Motion happens in long arcs. Sudden changes are impossible. Their environments encourage calm by design. Some creatures are composed of materials that would not support life elsewhere. Crystalline structures that grow, fracture, and regrow. Gaseous forms that hold cohesion through fields rather than flesh. These beings do not challenge physics so much as operate within different parameters. many creatures interact without hierarchy. No leaders, no dominance displays. Proximity determines interaction. Distance restores neutrality. Conflict is rare because avoidance is easier. Others exist in ecosystems built around simple cycles: feeding, rest, reproduction, repetition. Nothing escalates. Nothing accumulates. Life continues through balance rather than competition. There are creatures whose lifespans are extremely short: minutes, hours, a single day. They emerge, perform a function, and dissolve back into their environment. Their existence feels more like a process than a life. Some beings live for centuries without noticeable change. Their bodies resist decay. Their behavior remains constant. They experience the universe as a slow drift rather than a sequence of events. There are creatures that communicate through rhythm instead of sound. Pulses, repeating movements, changes in color or density. These interactions are steady and unhurried, more like synchronization than conversation. Other creatures never interact at all. They coexist by ignoring one another completely. Their environments are spacious enough that overlap is unnecessary. These beings feel solitary without being isolated. Many creatures appear dangerous only when observed closely: teeth, spines, acidic surfaces. But danger is contextual. These traits serve specific purposes within specific environments. Outside of those contexts, they are neutral. There are beings whose bodies are soft and malleable, adapting shape to space. They flow around obstacles rather than confront them. Their movement feels restful, like slow currents. Some creatures anchor themselves to floating debris or drifting structures, turning motion into habitat. They travel without effort, carried by forces larger than themselves. There are organisms that exist in layers. Multiple forms stacked together symbiotically. One provides structure. Another provides energy. Another handles perception. Together, they function as a single being without centralized control. Other creatures exist as colonies that never fully merge. Individual units remain independent while sharing resources. Cooperation happens without coordination. Some beings exist near anomalies where reality behaves inconsistently. Their forms adapt to distortion. Limbs stretch. Density fluctuates. They remain stable by yielding rather than resisting. There are creatures that exist primarily during specific conditions, appearing only when temperature, pressure, or radiation aligns correctly. When conditions shift, they become dormant, dissolving into their surroundings. Many creatures do not register humans as significant. Human presence is brief and irrelevant. These beings continue their cycles uninterrupted, unaffected by observation. Some creatures exhibit curiosity, but it is slow and limited. They investigate gently, then disengage. Nothing holds their attention for long. Others respond to stimuli automatically, without learning or memory. Each moment is processed independently. There is no anticipation, only reaction. There are beings that exist between states, neither fully alive nor inert. Processes unfold slowly, blurring the boundary between activity and stillness. These creatures feel suspended. Some creatures are built entirely around defense. Hard shells, reactive camouflage. These traits are passive rather than aggressive. Protection is constant, not escalated. Others rely on invisibility rather than resistance. They avoid interaction by fading into background patterns. Their survival depends on being overlooked, Across all these forms, a pattern emerges. Creatures do not strive for meaning. They do not seek narrative. They exist because conditions allow them to exist. This is what makes them easy to drift past. There is no need to remember names or classifications, no need to track danger or intent. Each creature appears briefly in awareness, then recedes. Another takes its place. The flow continues. The universe fills itself with life quietly. Beings adapt, persist, and fade without announcement. No single form dominates for long. No creature insists on attention. And in this steady procession, the mind can relax. Life moves on, gently, endlessly, without asking to be understood. As attention drifts further, the creatures themselves begin to feel less distinct. Individual shapes soften into impressions. Movement becomes rhythm. Presence becomes atmosphere. Life in the universe stops feeling crowded and instead feels evenly distributed, spread gently across space. Some creatures exist entirely in slow cycles. They remain dormant for long periods, then become briefly active before settling again. Their lives unfold in extended pauses, with motion appearing only when conditions align. These beings feel patient, unconcerned with continuity. There are creatures whose bodies are designed to conserve energy above all else. Minimal movement, minimal interaction. Their systems operate efficiently, sustaining existence without excess. These creatures feel quiet, not because they are absent, but because nothing in them rushes. Other creatures drift continuously, carried by air currents, water flows, or magnetic fields. They do not choose direction. Direction is given. Their lives feel effortless, shaped entirely by external motion. Some beings exist in perpetual twilight environments, their senses adapted to dimness. Their movements are cautious but unhurried. They respond gently to changes in light or pressure, never startling, never reacting sharply. There are creatures whose forms blur the line between organism and environment. Coral-like structures that grow and retract. Fungal networks that breathe slowly. These beings feel more like landscapes than animals, their presence steady and unobtrusive. Some creatures communicate through chemical signals released slowly into their surroundings. Interaction unfolds gradually. Responses take time. Nothing demands immediate acknowledgement. These exchanges feel more like weather patterns than conversations. Other creatures respond only to long-term changes, shifts in temperature over seasons, gradual alterations in terrain. Their awareness is broad and slow, tuned to patterns rather than moments. There are beings that exist only at certain depths, pressures, or densities. Their worlds are layered, and they remain within specific bands. Movement across layers is rare. Stability comes from staying within known ranges. Some creatures possess translucent bodies that reveal internal processes. Energy moving, systems cycling. Nothing is hidden. Their existence feels open and unguarded, operating without secrecy. Other beings are opaque and absorbent, concealing everything within. They move as solid shapes, offering no insight into their internal workings. Their presence feels grounded and self-contained. There are creatures that form long chains or clusters, moving together without centralized control. Direction emerges from collective motion rather than command. These beings feel unified without hierarchy. Some creatures separate easily, rejoining later without loss. Individuality is flexible. Connection is temporary. These worlds feel fluid, their social structures adaptable and calm. There are organisms that regenerate continuously. Damage repairs itself slowly and reliably. Injury is not dramatic. It is simply another process. These creatures feel resilient without aggression. Other beings shed parts of themselves regularly. Growth involves release rather than accumulation. Old forms drift away as new ones emerge. These creatures feel light, unburdened by permanence. Some creatures exist in environments saturated with radiation, heat, or pressure. Their bodies incorporate these forces rather than resisting them. What would be hostile elsewhere becomes neutral here. There are creatures that never stop moving, but their movement is so slow it feels like stillness. Position changes over hours rather than seconds. Observation requires patience. These beings feel restful simply by existing. Some beings rest often, entering long and active states between brief periods of activity. Their lives are shaped by rest rather than action. These creatures feel aligned with sleep itself. Others remain active constantly, but at such a low intensity that nothing spikes. Energy output stays even. No moments stand out. Their lives feel smooth and uninterrupted. There are creatures that exist only in narrow temperature bands. They emerge when conditions are exact and retreat when they shift. Their presence feels conditional, like a quiet alignment of factors. Some creatures adapt to noise by ignoring it completely. Sound passes through their awareness without effect. Silence and noise carry equal weight. These beings feel undisturbed. Other creatures rely on vibration rather than sound. They sense movement through surfaces and fluids. Their interactions are subtle, responding only to slow changes. There are beings whose lifespans overlap so extensively that generations coexist indistinguishably. Age carries no visual marker. These creatures feel timeless, their continuity unbroken. Some beings live alone, but never experience isolation. Their environments provide all necessary stimuli. Interaction is unnecessary. These creatures feel complete within themselves. Across all of these forms, life continues without urgency or narrative. Creatures do not compete for attention. They do not announce themselves. They exist as part of a steady background hum of biology and motion. This makes them easy to drift past. There is no need to categorize or remember. One shape blends into the next. Motion becomes texture. Presence becomes rhythm. The universe fills itself quietly with living things, each adapted to its corner, each content within its constraints. And as awareness softens, the idea of monsters dissolves entirely. There are only creatures, only life, only patterns repeating calmly across space. Nothing chases, nothing waits, nothing demands response. The universe breathes slowly through countless forms, each one existing briefly, gently, without concern for observation, and within that vast, patient motion, the mind finds it easy to let go. Thoughts slow, attention fades. Rest settles in. As the flow continues, even the idea of creatures as separate entities begins to fade. Life becomes a quiet presence rather than a collection of forms. Movement, growth, rest, and decay blend together into a single, steady process that unfolds without urgency. Some creatures exist so deeply embedded in their environments that they are indistinguishable from the terrain itself. Rock-like shells, plant-like limbs, bodies shaped to mirror the ground they rest upon. These beings do not hide intentionally. They simply belong so completely that separation is unnecessary. There are creatures whose awareness functions on long time scales. They do not respond to immediate changes. Their attention stretches across seasons, cycles, and gradual shifts. These beings feel patient, their perception broad and slow. Some creatures exist entirely in balance with a single environmental force. Wind-driven organisms that move only when air currents change. Tide-bound life that responds only to the rise and fall of water. Their existence feels synchronized rather than reactive. There are beings that glow faintly only when necessary. Light appears briefly, then fades. Communication is minimal. Energy is conserved. These creatures feel calm because nothing is ever expressed without purpose. Other beings emit constant low-level signals: heat, light, vibration. These emissions are steady and unchanging, forming part of the background rather than standing out. Their presence feels reassuring in its consistency. Some creatures exist in layered states of awareness. Part of their body rests while another remains active. Consciousness cycles gently through different regions. These beings feel perpetually half asleep, never fully alert or inactive. There are creatures whose bodies dissolve and reform slowly. Boundaries are flexible. Identity is maintained through pattern rather than structure. These beings feel fluid, their existence untroubled by permanence. Some beings live in environments where nutrients drift slowly past. Feeding requires patience rather than effort. These creatures wait without tension, moving only when conditions align. There are creatures whose movement is guided entirely by gradients. Heat, light, pressure. They follow gentle slopes rather than paths. Their lives feel guided rather than directed. Some creatures exist without centralized control. Behavior emerges from simple rules followed repeatedly. No decision-making, no reflection, just pattern unfolding. These beings feel stable because nothing interrupts their process. Other creatures possess awareness but lack anticipation. They experience each moment independently. There is no fear of what comes next, only response to what is present. Their existence feels light, unburdened by expectation. There are creatures whose environments dampen all extremes. Sound softens quickly. Light diffuses. Motion slows. These worlds encourage rest simply by removing sharpness. Some beings adapt by becoming smaller over time. Complexity reduces. Energy requirements lessen. Survival becomes easier as demands decrease. These creatures feel restful in their simplicity. Other beings adapt by becoming more spread out. Distributed systems replace centralized bodies. Damage becomes insignificant. These creatures feel resilient without effort. There are creatures that never leave their place of origin. They grow where they begin and remain there for their entire existence. Their worlds feel rooted and calm, anchored in stability. Some creatures migrate slowly across vast distances, but movement takes generations. Change happens without disruption. These beings feel timeless, their journeys unfolding beyond perception. There are creatures that interact only during narrow windows of opportunity. Brief overlaps. Short alignments. The rest of the time they exist independently. Their interactions feel gentle and rare. Some beings exist entirely in shadowed environments. Light is unnecessary. Their senses adapt to absence. These creatures feel quiet because nothing competes for attention. Other creatures exist in constant brightness. Their systems adapt by filtering excess input. Nothing overwhelms them. Their presence feels even and controlled. Across all these variations, the universe remains calm. Life fills space without crowding it. Every form fits somewhere. Nothing spills over into urgency. This is why the creatures fade naturally into the background. They do not chase. They do not threaten. They simply exist, performing the same processes that life performs everywhere. Growth, movement, rest, repeat. The mind no longer tracks details. Shapes blur, rhythms merge. Awareness settles into a wide, unfocused state where nothing stands out long enough to matter. There is no fear here, no danger, no need to stay alert. The universe continues quietly, populated by countless forms that move, rest, and change without intention or urgency. Creatures drift through space and time, each adapted to its place, each unconcerned with observation. And as this endless, gentle motion continues, the mind follows suit. Thoughts loosen. Attention softens. Sleep settles in naturally. As everything continues to soften, the creatures of the universe no longer feel separate from the spaces they inhabit. Life and environment blend together into a single, quiet presence. Movement becomes subtle. Existence becomes background. Nothing asks to be noticed. Some creatures live so slowly that their lives feel like extensions of geology. Growth measured in decades. Motion measured in centimeters. Their bodies respond to time rather than moments. These beings feel ancient, not because they remember, but because they endure. There are creatures whose bodies are composed almost entirely of repeating units, segments, cells, simple forms, replicated again and again. Individual parts matter very little. Continuity matters more. These beings feel calm because nothing depends on any single piece. Some creatures exist in environments where energy is scarce. Every movement is economical, every action conserved. These beings rest often, pausing between motions without impatience. Their lives unfold gently, shaped by restraint rather than drive. There are creatures whose senses are muted by design. Sight limited, hearing softened, awareness reduced to essentials. These beings experience the universe without overload. Their perception is narrow, and within that narrowness calm settles easily. Other creatures perceive far more than humans ever could, but their processing is slow. Information arrives continuously, but interpretation lags behind. Nothing demands immediate reaction. These beings feel unhurried despite constant input. Some creatures exist entirely within protective environments. Thick shells, dense atmospheres, liquid mediums. External forces rarely reach them directly. These beings feel insulated, cushioned against sudden change. There are creatures that rely on environmental cycles to regulate themselves completely. Light triggers activity. Darkness triggers rest. Temperature shifts guide movement. These beings surrender control to rhythm, letting the universe decide when to act. Some creatures have no clear beginning or end to their lives. They divide, they merge, they reorganize. Identity persists through pattern rather than continuity. These beings feel fluid, unconcerned with duration. Other creatures experience life as a single extended state. No stages, no transitions. Existence remains constant from start to finish. These beings feel stable because nothing changes internally. There are creatures that exist primarily as fields rather than bodies, electromagnetic patterns, energy distributions. Presence without form. These beings do not move so much as fluctuate. Their existence feels diffuse and gentle. Some creatures live in perpetual suspension, floating, drifting, never touching solid ground. Their bodies adapt to constant support. Motion is smooth and continuous. These beings feel weightless in every sense. There are creatures whose environments never grow quiet, yet the noise is uniform, a constant low vibration, a steady hum. The lack of variation makes sound fade into background. These beings rest within consistency. Some creatures exist in near silence, where even motion produces little disturbance. These beings feel peaceful because nothing echoes or lingers. There are creatures whose internal processes mirror environmental rhythms, heartbeats syncing with tides, metabolic cycles aligned with stellar movement. These beings feel integrated, their lives unfolding in harmony with larger forces. Some creatures never encounter others of their kind. They live alone without awareness of isolation. Their needs are met entirely by environment. These beings feel complete without interaction. Other creatures exist in dense collectives but never experience crowding. Boundaries remain clear. Interaction stays minimal. These beings feel calm because proximity never becomes pressure. There are creatures that appear only briefly, like passing conditions rather than permanent life. They emerge, fulfill a role, and dissolve. Their presence feels light, leaving no trace. Some creatures persist across extreme conditions by entering extended, dormant states. Rest lasts longer than activity. These beings feel aligned with sleep itself, their lives structured around stillness. Across all of these forms, the idea of monsters fades entirely. Nothing hunts, nothing stalks, nothing waits in anticipation. Life exists without narrative tension, unfolding quietly across countless environments. The universe does not frame these creatures as threats. It holds them gently, giving each exactly the space and rhythm required to continue. As attention drifts through this vast, calm population, the mind no longer tries to define or separate. Everything blends into a soft awareness of life continuing everywhere, without urgency or demand. Shapes dissolve into motion. Motion dissolves into rhythm. Rhythm dissolves into quiet. Nothing needs to be watched. Nothing needs to be understood. Nothing needs to be remembered. Creatures continue living somewhere beyond awareness, adapted, balanced, resting when necessary, moving when conditions allow. And within that endless, gentle continuity, the mind follows the same pattern. Thoughts slow, edges soften. Awareness settles. Eventually, even the sense of observing creatures begins to fade. Life no longer appears as something external to notice, but as part of a broad, quiet presence that fills the universe evenly. Nothing stands apart. Nothing draws focus. Everything simply continues. Some forms of life exist so passively that they barely register as living at all. Metabolism slowed to the edge of stillness. Movement occurring over spans too long to track. These beings do not act so much as persist. Their existence feels like a soft extension of the environment itself. There are creatures whose bodies change so gradually that no single moment marks transformation. Growth blends into decay. Repair blends into wear. These beings feel constant, even though they are always changing. The absence of contrast creates calm. Some creatures live in environments where signals travel slowly. Sound dampened. Light diffused. Information arrives gently and late. Reaction becomes unnecessary. These beings exist without surprise, their awareness always slightly behind the present moment. There are forms of life that never experience interruption. No sudden events, no sharp shifts. Their worlds operate within narrow margins that keep everything even. These beings feel settled, their existence uninterrupted by extremes. Some creatures exist entirely, within stable flows, currents, winds, energy streams. They do not move independently. They are carried. Direction does not matter, because movement is constant. These beings feel unburdened by choice. There are creatures that respond only to absence rather than presence. They move when light fades, when warmth recedes, when pressure drops. Their lives are shaped by what leaves rather than what arrives. These beings feel gentle, their actions triggered by quiet transitions. Some creatures have bodies that absorb change without reacting visibly. Temperature shifts, radiation fluctuations, pressure changes. Everything passes through them. These beings feel resilient not because they resist, but because they accept. There are beings whose forms dissolve slowly into their surroundings at the end of their cycles. No remains, no markers. They fade back into matter seamlessly. Their existence leaves no sharp boundary between life and non-life. Some creatures never experience a distinct beginning. They emerge gradually from environmental processes, indistinguishable from what surrounds them until they are fully formed. Their arrival feels continuous rather than sudden. There are creatures whose presence is marked only by subtle effects, slight shifts in temperature, minor changes in chemical balance. They influence their environments quietly, without visible motion. Some beings exist in layers of perception. One part senses the environment while another remains dormant. Awareness cycles gently, ensuring that nothing is ever fully alert or fully asleep. These beings feel perpetually calm. There are creatures that exist only as long as conditions remain perfectly balanced. When balance shifts, they disperse without resistance. Their lives feel conditional, but not fragile. Some creatures live within thick mediums that slow everything down. Dense atmospheres, viscous fluids. Movement takes effort. These beings conserve energy by necessity, their lives unfolding, slowly and evenly. There are beings whose internal rhythms are so steady that they act as anchors within their ecosystems. Others synchronize around them. Their calm spreads outward through consistency. Some creatures exist without any form of competition. Resources replenish exactly as needed. No scarcity develops. These beings feel at ease because nothing is ever at stake. There are creatures that experience existence without memory. Each moment stands alone. There is no accumulation of past or anticipation of future. Their lives feel light, unburdened by continuity. Some beings exist entirely as cycles. They are never fully present as individuals. Processes repeat endlessly. Identity emerges only through repetition. These beings feel timeless. There are creatures that never rest completely, yet never exert effort. Activity remains constant but minimal. Energy output never spikes. Their existence feels smooth, uninterrupted. Some creatures rest for most of their lives, waking, only briefly to perform essential functions. Their cycles are shaped around stillness rather than action. These beings feel aligned with rest itself. Across all these forms, life continues without urgency, without narrative, without demand. Nothing hunts, nothing hides, nothing prepares for conflict. Existence unfolds quietly, guided by conditions rather than intention. The idea of monsters has long since disappeared. There are only forms adapted to where they are, moving and resting in ways that make sense for their worlds. As awareness drifts through this calm abundance, the mind no longer separates observer from observed. Everything blends into a single, gentle awareness of life continuing everywhere at once. No details stand out, no shapes demand focus, no motion requires tracking. The universe breathes slowly through countless living forms, each one part of a steady rhythm that does not change, and the mind, no longer alert or curious, settles into that rhythm naturally. Thoughts loosen and fade. Attention dissolves. Rest deepens. The rhythm holds steady, unbroken. The universe continues without signaling transition, and the presence of life becomes something felt rather than seen. Creatures no longer appear as subjects to be described. They become part of a continuous, low hum of existence that stretches across space. Some forms of life exist so close to equilibrium that their presence barely alters their surroundings. Energy flows in and out evenly. No excess accumulates. These beings leave no imprint strong enough to mark time. Their calm comes from balance rather than effort. There are creatures whose awareness never narrows. They do not focus on single stimuli. Everything arrives at once, softly, without hierarchy. Nothing becomes urgent because nothing stands out. These beings experience existence as a wide, even field. Some creatures live in environments where change happens slowly enough to be unnoticed. Temperature shifts over centuries. Terrain reshapes over millennia. These beings do not react to change because to them, nothing ever truly changes. There are forms of life whose bodies function like filters. Matter passes through. Energy passes through. Nothing is retained long enough to become significant. These beings feel light, unburdened by accumulation. Some creatures exist entirely within repeating loops. They perform the same sequence endlessly. There is no deviation, no innovation. Their lives feel complete because nothing is missing. There are beings whose structures are soft enough to absorb impact without resistance. Disturbance never escalates. Everything settles quickly. These beings feel peaceful because nothing ever lingers. Some creatures never experience isolation because their environments provide constant input. Light, vibration, pressure, and chemical signals form a steady background. Awareness is always filled, but never overwhelmed. There are forms of life whose existence is defined by proximity rather than identity. They respond only to what is near. Distance restores neutrality. These beings live moment to moment, without projection. Some creatures experience rest not as a separate state, but as part of every action. Movement contains stillness. Activity contains pause. Their lives never spike into alertness or drop into exhaustion. There are beings that drift through space itself, unattached to planets or surfaces. Their movement is slow and continuous. Direction has no meaning. These beings feel weightless in every sense. Some forms of life exist only as transitions. They emerge during shifts between states. When equilibrium returns, they fade. Their presence feels like a gentle byproduct rather than a goal. There are creatures whose internal cycles mirror the slow expansion and contraction of space. Their rhythms are vast. Individual moments do not register. These beings feel cosmic without being grand. Some creatures are shaped entirely by repetition, identical forms replicated endlessly. No variation, no differentiation. Their existence feels smooth because nothing changes. There are beings whose perception fades in and out naturally. Awareness pulses softly. They are never fully awake, never fully asleep. Their lives unfold in a gentle oscillation. Some creatures exist without any concept of threat. Their environments do not support sudden harm. Survival does not require vigilance. These beings feel safe because danger does not exist as a category. There are forms of life whose presence is marked only by absence. When they move away, conditions shift slightly. When they return, balance is restored. Their influence is subtle and quiet. Some creatures live so long that beginnings and endings lose meaning. Existence becomes continuous. Identity stretches thin across time until it feels almost abstract. There are beings that live briefly but completely. Their entire existence fits into a single, unbroken process. There is no fragmentation, no anticipation. Their lives feel whole. Across all of these, the universe maintains its even tone. Life does not escalate. It does not compete. It fills space gently, adapting without resistance, continuing without urgency. The mind no longer tries to follow individual forms. Awareness widens and then relaxes. The details dissolve into a soft sense of continuity. Nothing requires naming. Nothing requires explanation. Nothing asks to be remembered. Creatures continue existing somewhere beyond attention, guided by conditions rather than intention, resting when they must, moving when they can. The universe does not notice observation fading. It does not pause. It continues as it always has, steady and indifferent. And within that steady continuation, the mind follows naturally. The continuity remains unbroken. Nothing shifts abruptly. Nothing signals an ending. The universe simply continues to hold itself together in the same quiet way, allowing life to exist without drawing attention to it. At this stage, even the idea of creatures feels abstract. Life is no longer perceived as individual forms, but as a gentle process unfolding everywhere at once. Movement, rest, growth, and dissolution blend into a single, slow pattern that does not require observation. Some forms of life exist so evenly within their environments that their presence cannot be isolated from surrounding conditions. Temperature, pressure, and chemistry remain balanced whether they are active or still. These beings feel integrated rather than distinct. There are creatures whose internal rhythms are so stable that nothing disrupts them. External changes register only faintly. Their awareness remains constant, never rising or falling sharply. These beings feel calm because fluctuation never reaches them. Some creatures exist in states of partial awareness at all times. Perception is diffused. Attention never concentrates. Experience flows evenly, without peaks or valleys. Their lives feel smooth, uninterrupted by alertness or fatigue. There are beings whose bodies function as slow systems, rather than responsive ones. Input takes time to register. Output takes time to resolve. Everything happens with delay. These beings feel unhurried simply by design. Some forms of life exist entirely within equilibrium zones. They do not survive outside narrow conditions, but within those conditions, nothing threatens them. Their existence feels stable and self-contained. There are creatures that never experience accumulation. Nutrients pass through. Energy circulates. Waste dissipates immediately. Nothing builds up. Their lives feel light, unburdened by excess. Some beings exist as steady presences within their ecosystems. Others adapt around them, responding to their consistency. These creatures feel grounding, their calm influencing everything nearby. There are forms of life that respond only to gradual change. Sudden shifts pass unnoticed. Their awareness is tuned to trends rather than events. These beings experience time as a smooth slope rather than a sequence. Some creatures exist in layered environments where sound, light, and motion are softened at every level. Sensory input never spikes. Their worlds feel muted, protected from intensity. There are beings whose existence never becomes urgent because their environments replenish exactly what is needed. Scarcity never develops. Competition never arises. These lives unfold without tension. Some creatures have no internal markers for time, no cycles, no phases. Existence feels continuous, unsegmented. These beings feel timeless, their lives unbroken by transitions. There are forms of life that dissolve naturally when conditions shift. No resistance, no struggle. Their existence ends as gently as it began. These beings feel aligned with impermanence rather than threatened by it. Some creatures exist entirely as patterns rather than bodies. Energy flows repeating endlessly. Structures forming and dissolving without central control. Their presence feels diffuse and calming. There are beings that never experience anticipation. They respond only to what is present. The future holds no weight. Their awareness remains light and immediate. Some creatures rest so deeply that activity becomes secondary. Movement occurs only when required. Most of existence unfolds in stillness. These beings feel attuned to rest rather than action. There are forms of life whose environments never demand alertness. No sudden predators. No abrupt changes. Survival does not require vigilance. These beings feel safe because safety is assumed. Across all of these, the universe remains unchanged in tone. Life exists without escalation, without drama, without narrative. Nothing chases. Nothing waits. Nothing prepares. The mind no longer distinguishes one description from the next. Everything blends into a continuous awareness of existence, continuing gently, without pause. No detail stands out. No pattern demands attention. No motion requires tracking. The universe holds life the way space holds stars, evenly, effortlessly, without comment. And the mind, no longer stimulated or alert, follows that same evenness. Thoughts thin. Awareness softens. Rest deepens fully. Creatures continue existing somewhere beyond perception, adapting quietly, moving slowly, resting often, unconcerned with being seen. The stillness deepens without needing to announce itself. Nothing changes in a way that can be pointed to. The universe simply keeps doing what it has always done, and that constancy becomes the most noticeable thing of all. Life continues everywhere, but it no longer presents itself as activity. It exists as a condition, a quiet background state in which motion and rest are evenly balanced. Creatures do not arrive or depart in any dramatic sense. They persist, adjust, and fade in ways that feel natural and unremarkable. Some forms of life exist at thresholds so narrow that they never experience excess. Temperature remains within a gentle range. Energy input matches output exactly. These beings feel stable because nothing ever pushes them toward urgency. There are creatures whose internal processes run so smoothly that no single action stands out. Feeding, movement, rest, and repair blend together. Their lives feel continuous, without moments that require attention. Some beings exist entirely in environments that soften all extremes. Light diffuses before it reaches them. Sound dissipates quickly. Motion slows naturally. These worlds feel built for calm, and the creatures within them reflect that calm effortlessly. There are forms of life that never encounter anything unexpected. Their environments are consistent enough that anticipation never develops. These beings experience existence as a steady presence rather than a series of events. Some creatures exist only as long as balance is maintained, and when balance shifts, they dissolve without resistance. Their impermanence is gentle, not abrupt. Their existence feels complete even without duration. There are beings whose awareness remains evenly spread across their surroundings. No single stimulus captures focus. Everything is noticed lightly. Their experience of the universe is wide and soft, without sharp edges. Some creatures live within systems that reset themselves continuously. Minor disruptions resolve immediately. Nothing accumulates. Their worlds feel self-correcting, stable through repetition. There are forms of life that move so little that motion feels optional. They remain where they are because there is no reason to leave. Their environments provide everything needed. These beings feel settled without attachment. Some creatures drift constantly, but so slowly that drift feels like stillness. Position changes over long spans of time. Direction loses meaning. Their lives feel unanchored but calm. There are beings whose perception does not differentiate between internal and external states. Thought, sensation, and environment blend together. These creatures feel unified with their surroundings. Some forms of life exist without any need for interaction. They are complete in isolation. Their worlds offer enough stimulation to sustain awareness without connection. There are creatures whose existence is marked only by subtle influence, slight changes in chemistry, gentle redistribution of energy. They affect their environments quietly, without visible action. Some beings exist in layered states of rest. One system remains active while another sleeps. Awareness cycles gently, never reaching full alertness or full unconsciousness. Their lives feel balanced between motion and rest. There are forms of life that experience no contrast between activity and stillness. Everything unfolds at the same pace. Their existence feels even, unsegmented by change. Across all of these, the universe maintains its calm continuity. Life does not surge or collapse. It spreads evenly, adapting without conflict, persisting without effort. At this point, there is nothing left to follow, no details to hold, no distinctions to maintain. Awareness settles into a broad, quiet acceptance of existence continuing everywhere at once. Nothing needs explanation. Nothing needs memory. Nothing needs attention. The universe remains vast, but no longer overwhelming. Its scale becomes comforting, its repetition soothing. Creatures continue living somewhere beyond perception, guided by conditions rather than intention, resting when necessary, moving when allowed. And the mind, no longer stimulated, no longer searching, mirrors that same rhythm,